In the first Risk of Rain, there are a number of survivors that can be chosen to play through the game as, with choices ranging from the all-purpose commando to the long-range sniper and even close-quarter combatants like the mercenary. When Hopoo released Risk of Rain 2 years later, they brought some of these old classes over to the sequel to carry on the spirit from the first game. However, while the classes are the same, the characters aren't. What this means is the survivors from the second game are not the same ones from the first, i.e. the commando from the Contact Light is not the same commando from the Safe Travels. This is the case for every carryover class in the games, except for one, the creature known as Acrid. Having had the pleasure of being involved in the events of both games, as well as a little adventure of its own, Acrid has a hectic life story that's pretty interesting and compelling. So let's take the time to go through its story, see all the craziness that's been a part of, and ultimately how that chaos keeps interrupting the one thing it desires most in its life. Out in the scattered stars of the universe, there are an uncountable number of organisms. There are large mushrooms that have gained the ability to walk. There's a parasitic sentient tar that dominates any life form that touches it. And there are aromatic single-celled organisms that are massive in size. Among this diverse spectrum of life are a set of creatures that resemble the Lemurians, but are actually a completely different species from the reptilians. Whereas the Lemurians typically have a slender frame and the ability to wield fire, these crocodilians have a bulky, muscular frame, which they use to leap across huge distances. And they have the ability to secrete a toxic bile that is extremely caustic to anything that touches it, even having the ability to degrade metals that come in contact with it. However, the crocodilians themselves are completely immune to the poison or blight that they secrete. While it's presumed there are more of these creatures out there, after all the universe is a huge place, there has only ever been one specimen of this crocodilian species found. A specimen that received the nickname Acrid due to its mastery over the toxins it secretes. But where it was originally found or where it could have come from is currently unknown. All that's known is that at some point, the human interstellar shipping company known as UES had Acrid chained and locked up as a prisoner in a container in a cargo hold of a vessel known as the UES Contact Light, as it made a journey to ship various goods to human colonies across the stars. As Acrid sat alone in the dark, waiting to reach its destination, where it would be poked and prodded by a researcher trying to understand it, it felt its container tremble and shake. And then suddenly it heard sirens start ringing out and the sounds of combat erupt. It had no way of knowing, but the UES Contact Light was under attack by an alien named Providence, who felt that the ship and its crew, after turning from its planned shipping route for an unknown reason, were a danger to its homeworld of Petrichor 5. When Providence attacked the ship, killing the crew and destroying the vessel, the vast cargo of the Contact Light started spilling out into space and falling to the planet. And among the falling debris was the prison of Acrid. The container crashed down into an aquatic section of the planet, a region known as the Sunken Tombs. But unfortunately for Acrid, the container remained shut, meaning despite being free from the humans, it was still a prisoner. It would have to hope that a chance encounter would occur that would give it the freedom it sought. Eventually, after some time, a lone survivor from the Contact Light came upon Acrid's container and opened its doors. Acrid, seeing its liberator was one of the creatures that had captured it in the first place, immediately started attacking them, desperate to never again become their prisoner. As its bulkiness helped it weather their attacks, Acrid threw poisons and toxins at its opponent while trying its best to use its immense strength to crush them in its jaws. But despite its power, it was bested in battle by the survivor. However, to its surprise, the survivor didn't kill it, nor place shackles around its wrists again. They had no desire to imprison Acrid. They just wanted to make their way to the wreckage of the contact light to try and escape the planet. Upon realizing this, Acrid, perhaps being submissive to them since it was just beaten by them in battle, went along with the survivor, helping them through the hazardous environments of the planet and fight off its hostile inhabitants. With Acrid at their side, the survivor was able to make it to the bridge of the crashed contact light, kill Providence, and use the leftover parts of the ship to launch into space in a bid to return home. As a thank you to Acrid, the survivor agreed to leave it on the surface of Petrichor 5, where it could finally be left alone, fulfilling a dream it had had ever since it was taken prisoner by humanity. Now free from the worry of imprisonment, Acrid enjoyed the peaceful life of solitude it had long sought. It bathed in the bright sun in the Garden of the Wisps, it curled up and napped on the soft grass of the Titanic plains, and it soaked in the drizzle of Siren's Call. It was just what it wanted. One day, while relishing the calmness of its isolation, it noticed a large, crab-like creature it had never seen on the planet's surface before. This creature was a being known as a Void Reaver and came from a separate plane of existence called the Void. Void Reavers would occasionally pass through the borders of the planes to come to the universe and detain objects and creatures, a process that crystallized the atoms of the item or entity and sent them to the Void, where they were to be stored in special containers called cells until the end of time, effectively making them jailers that could imprison things at will. But of course, Acrid knew none of this. All it knew was that there was this curious creature that it had never seen before that was really interesting. Before it knew what was happening, Acrid found a dark ball welling up around it, which then collapsed on its form. To its dismay, it found itself a prisoner yet again. But this time, a prisoner to the mysterious creatures of the deep, dark void, doomed to wait until the end of time, where it would be judged and receive a sentence. However, after spending an immeasurable amount of time suspended in this juice gem state, quite suddenly, the cell that contained Acrid broke open and released it, reassembling the crocodilian into its natural form as it did so. Upon its release, Acrid felt something in itself that it knew came from a connection between itself and its jailers. It wasn't sure how it knew. Maybe it was a result of its imprisonment, or something that emerged after some kind of experiment held by the creatures. But it knew it felt something, and that something was panic. The Void creatures were freaking out because something was going wrong within their prison. Something was shaking the bars of its cell and breaking out. Maybe whatever prisoner that was who broke Acrid out of its cell. It turned to face its liberator and saw not another prisoner, but a human being who had used the opportunity opened up by the jailbreak to invade the void fields of the realm to raid it for information and goods. Though the human was somewhat familiar, Acrid could tell they were not the same one that had previously freed it from its confinement in the sunken tombs. But seeing this stranger show it the same kindness as its human companion from before, Acrid decided to go along with and help this human as payment for its freedom, just as it did with his former companion all that time ago. Together with the operative, Acrid once again made its way through the hazardous environments and hostile creatures of the planet, seeing some familiar locales and faces as it did so. While traveling through these locations, Acrid learned the human it was helping now hadn't crashed on Petrichor 5 and thus wasn't trying to escape the planet like the survivor it had helped previously. This human was part of a salvage and rescue operation that was looking to recover the lost cargo of that other ship, the Contact Light, as well as save any survivors that they came across. This didn't change things for Acrid, who was happy to help its liberator, even when their search took them far outside the bounds of their original mission. When the operative, after finding the primordial teleporter in Sky Meadow, changed its alignment to point at the moon and warped to the rocky satellite, Acrid followed them, finding itself on the surface of commencement. It then helped the operative charge 4 pillars in the area, helped them fight and kill Mithrix, the king that ruled over the satellite, and helped them escape the moon by keeping void creatures and lunar constructs at bay while a space shuttle started up. Unlike before, however, Acrid couldn't be left behind as the moon was going to be destroyed, so it hopped aboard the shuttle and escaped with a human. As the shuttle pulled away from commencement, Acrid was heading towards the people whose job it was to recollect the lost cargo of the contact light, and technically, Acrid was included among that cargo, meaning that very likely, it was going to find itself a prisoner once again to the very people that had imprisoned it in the first place. However, whether through the deceit of the human it was with, or through deceiving itself, Acrid was hopeful for its future, hopeful that now it would finally be free. But when humanity continued to make expeditions into the void, motivated by the void creature's detainment of commencement before its destruction, and their attacks upon Petrichor 5 where they seemed to want to detain the planet in the same way, Acrid was fighting alongside them. Whether its participation was a choice of its own, perhaps driven by a desire for revenge against its old guards and the voidling that imprisoned it, or due to humanity forcing it to help them with their plans, is currently unknown. Hopefully, Acrid is in control of its destiny, and when everything is all said and done, it can finally get the peaceful life of solitude it so deserves. But that brings us to the end of the story of the creature known as Acrid. Now, I'm not perfect, so there may be something wrong in there, but this should give you an idea of everything Acrid's gone through thus far in both games of Risk of Rain. Of course, Risk of Rain 2 is still being worked on, so there's a chance we could get more details of Acrid's story in the future. But we'll just have to patiently wait for that day to come. All I know is that I hope he gets a happy ending. In the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to ask and I'll do my best to answer them. But that's it for this one, so thank you for watching and see you later.